Yeah. Let me drop exclusive game from my exclusive mind. You be out here chasing fame, I stay steady on my grind. Zero diamonds, zero.
Thank you for tapping into the Exclusive Minds podcast. Today we're going to be having an exclusive conversation with exclusive content from Exclusive Minds. I'm your host, Rook, and
Joe?
let's get right into it.
Okay, here we go. Try number
Take two.
two. For those, if this actually makes it through. The camera's just completely jerked our chain.
Oh, good. We were only going for like 2 minutes, so it could have been a lot worse.
Literally, and the GoPro quits, and I'm like, "What the hell just happened?" The GoPro loves us; they just absolutely love us.
It could have been a whole podcast. A little callback there to whatever that
it's
was.
so funny. 2 seconds ago, I was like, "Yeah, I was looking at the Insta360. I really want to get one because I think it's a better camera." And everything I've read, they say it's a better camera. But I'm like, "Yeah, I have a GoPro, so why the hell would I get? I'm not going to do it." And
2 minutes
maybe
later.
this was my kick in the ass. Like literally, like a minute and 40 seconds, and the camera quits.
Yep.
And I'm like, "Yeah, okay, maybe that's the reason why I want to get an Insta360 because I'm tired of this GoPro shit."
Well, we're here now. Episode
72, I think you said.
could be.
We're guessing.
We're
so
guessing.
if it's
So
73 or 71, so
Or
be it.
74. We're shooting in the dark a little bit, but
So you were saying that we took a month off because we were
right.
wrapped around the axle of politics and
yeah. So during
couldn't
that
get ourselves away from it.
during the month, we were fighting with FBI, CIA, NRA,
NSA.
all of it.
Yeah.
They basically broke through
Secret
Joe's
Service.
door and were like, "You guys can't talk about politics ever again." Essentially, is kind of the gist of
We're
it.
in the same state as Butler, Pennsylvania, so we're in the same state. So maybe that puts us at risk.
Yeah, let's go back, I guess, to 3 weeks ago. That all happened, right? I mean, a lot's kind of happened.
That was after.
That was after the podcast. We didn't talk about
we didn't
that.
talk about that, didn't we?
No, we were out to dinner real quick. I mean, it's kind of old news at this point, way old news. But we were out to dinner at like a pretty nice restaurant, and the bill's coming out, and I got a notification from like my group chat's blowing up. It was like, "Bro, Trump got shot in the ear." And I showed Taylor, and she's like, "What the?" Out loud, just let it go. Drop the F-bomb.
That's Taylor.
Yeah, in the middle of the restaurant. I'm like, shh. And she's like, "What? Is he like alive or dead? What's going on?" And yeah, it was just crazy that happened. I don't know how that happened, but sure enough, it did. A slanted rooftop, I guess, is what caused it.
I don't know, man. It's like it's this is why political podcasts are like the number one, because this is an hour worth of content easy, right?
Yep. Let's time warp to 30 minutes from now.
Yeah, I mean, we could get into it, but I mean, there's no way it should have happened, right? I mean, it's freaking crazy. I mean, well, you look at the sort of the recap now, and it's like, how in the hell did this happen?
Well, yeah, and then, I mean, don't mean to go conspiracy theorist out here, but the kid was 20 years old, had like kind of like a ranked rifle. It doesn't sound like it was nothing special, just like an AK type of older rifle type deal. He was like 150 yards away and got close enough to hit his ear, which is, I mean, not an easy shot.
They show that too, and if Trump hadn't turned his head a split second before, it was going through his skull like big time.
Yeah, like the whole back half.
It's crazy. I mean, it really is just absolutely crazy.
Dude.
And I was watching that speech live, and I could only imagine. I'm like, oh my God.
If you were to go to the gun range, your first shot at 150 range or 50 yards, do you think you're hitting a bullseye? First shot,
the size of someone's head.
Yeah. You think so? Your first shot?
First shot. Well, I mean, with the scope, sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess he did shoot a couple times.
He had a scope, right? Shot. So I mean, he was zeroed in. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No worries at all.
I don't know. I guess he did shoot a couple times. I think because I keep thinking, I'm like, if he shot one time, it might have been a little bit difficult. But it was like, I think it was a couple times. It was like 5 times.
150 yards with an AR with a scope is.
Did he have a scope on it?
I'm pretty sure.
I don't know. I just kind of heard it was an AK. I didn't know what it was, but nonetheless, I'm
assuming.
I'm always thinking it's an inside job, but that's just me.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that think the same, or it was just a total dereliction of duty. And there's all kinds of conspiracies and whatnots and say nots. And I think at the end of the day, it was just a complete. They just fucked up. I mean,
and then a week later, Biden had COVID.
Yeah,
it was funny. It was funny when he had COVID. We were at the Dover Air Force Base doing a job, and this was during the time that
Oh, so
the
yeah, that's
conspiracy-
when he was flying back, right?
This
So
was during the conspiracy theory. Like everyone was just like, "Is he dead? Is he alive? Like
Yeah.
whatever." And the guy that we were with, he was talking to, I guess, a former congressperson of like Philadelphia area, who actually knows the Bidens, and he said he talked to him like a little bit, and that's the confirmation that we heard that he was alive was with this guy that we met at the Air Force Base.
Well, I don't think anybody thought he was dead. They just figured he was doing his same old.
You'd be surprised. But then, fast forward again, he announced that he's not rerunning, correct?
Correct.
And now we have
Kamala
Donald Trump
Harris.
versus Kamala Harris.
Yep.
With J.D. Vance, but did she pick her?
Not yet.
Running mate?
Rumor is it's going to be, I keep saying Ben Shapiro, but it's
Ben Shapiro from
Josh
PA?
Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Ben Shapiro's the podcast
Yeah.
conservative.
Yeah, it
guy.
wouldn't be him for sure. Yeah, no, Josh Shapiro.
Josh Shapiro. So
That's who they think.
what's funny though is J.D. Vance, from just overhearing some of my coworkers talk, he wasn't. He kind of had like an interesting, there was just an interesting choice behind the pick because he wasn't a Trump fan up until recent, and then
No, well, so
right,
he was
could
not
kinda
a
take the
fan
lead
of
on that.
Trump in 2016 when he first ran.
Okay, and then
What he basically said is, over the course of his administration, right, he realized that he was wrong. Basically, says it like he goes, that's I was wrong. I didn't think he would be a good president, and he turned out to be the best president that I've ever had in my lifetime.
Yeah, he did say that. I did see that. He said that.
And he goes, that's I think that's a true testament to someone who's got an open mind. Is they're willing to say, hey, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And this is right? So, and it's kind of hard to argue that, right? I mean, he didn't shy away from it.
Yeah, and he was a former venture capitalist who got into politics. Was kind of his spin-off, right?
He was in the military. He was in the Marines, and then got out and got into VC with Peter Thiel, and made a crap ton of money, and then got into politics. Wrote a book, right? So I think Hillbilly Elegy is his book about his life story, which is kind of interesting in itself. I mean, it's probably public knowledge. We don't need to get into it, but he grew up pretty poor and single mother and all kinds of weird shit. So
gotcha. Yeah, no, I was just curious, and I feel like you said, politics is always a conversation that you could kind of go always, kind of go on, which is cool. I mean,
it's so easy.
The fact that, you could have a conversation is the most important thing.
You still can't, though. I mean, if you're in like-minded circles, you can have that conversation all day long. But as soon as you get into these situations, I know I can't have a conversation with some of my liberal friends. Like, I know people at work that I know are liberals, right? I just know it, and you just can't have this conversation. Can't.
Yeah. No. I think
it's still super polarized.
I think that applies to both parties. I don't think it's just like you said. I mean, it could be like someone like that's in the other situation where they're extremely liberal. And
it really, unfortunately, I don't think it's getting better.
If you're mature enough, I guess is the correct word, to have a conversation with anyone without arguing, or I don't know, not specifically. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking generally.
Yeah.
Then I don't know. I always think it's interesting just to hear kind of where people kind of lie on either side of the fence.
That's the way it used to be, and that's the way it should be. But it's such a delicate dance when it comes to just out in public having the conversation.
And I could imagine you said just even like at a workplace too, like having that conversation, like it would just be like, I don't know, like for us, it's more public that I talked about it. Like we're a smaller firm, so we can have that conversation. So
I don't even know how to, this is a story. Like, so, and you're in this environment now, so you kind of see it where you go and you meet customers, or you meet like contractors, or you meet somebody, right? So I'm traveling with my boss. My boss is actually younger than me. He's in his late 30s. And he's Jewish, right? It's relevant to it's not, I don't care, right? It's relevant to the story.
No one's going to.
It's relevant to the story. So we're going to meet this contractor in Chicago. myself and him have never met these people. Right.
Okay.
So we walk into this meeting, and we're here. We're to talk about a big project we're doing. And there's three of them, and there's the two of us. And we sit down, and we're just kind of having a casual conversation. And this one guy's, funny enough, he's an Italian. I don't know if that's relevant either, but for our family, it seems relevant.
It's so funny. You have to like preference everything. It's relevant. It's relevant. It doesn't. Like,
it is
so
relevant.
You can say
so I mean, you know what I don't even know. Chris, I'm burying myself in a hole here.
You're close to retirement, man. It's all good.
But you know what? You know, sort of the general vibe, and you know, we're having a conversation, and then we're talking about the project, and then the next thing you know, it just sort of strays, and politics comes up, and then this guy just.
Which one, the Italian or the Jewish person?
The Italian guy, right? He just starts going off, and I don't even remember this. Like at one point, he's talking about Suge Knight, and he drops the N bomb.
Oh wait, the guy!
I'm like, what the fuck? Like, so.
Okay.
I mean, never met the guy, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't know anything about us, and I'm like, okay,
That's not cool.
Shit happens. I mean, whatever. And then it just kind of he basically trashed on every ethnic group you could possibly think of, right? It was he had some derogatory terms for Kamala Harris, and then he goes, yeah, you know those those cheap bastards, the Jews, you know what I mean, right? And
he looks at the other guy.
I'm with my boss, and I am fucking cringing to death. And I mean, I'm like, holy shit, did he just say that out loud? Like, what am I supposed to do?
This
right?
is the
like,
customers talking, right?
Yeah. And
okay.
I'm like, holy shit. And luckily, my boss is like, he doesn't, he's like, fuck, who cares, right?
Yeah.
But he was the same way. He's like, he doesn't know me, and he doesn't know you, and he just starts going off on all of this shit, and like
first time meeting's kind of crazy.
And I'm like, oh yeah,
Let me say, it's crazy to say that stuff anyway, but on the first time it's crazy.
Like, to people you don't know, right? And it got me thinking, because it's like he just went full in, like assuming that we're all sort of on the same side of the fence, right? And my boss, I think, is a liberal, right? I don't think he's going to vote for Trump, and I'm like, ooh, wow, this is just... and it was one of those cringeworthy things where, like, even a day after, I'm like, holy shit, what just happened? Because it was just the weirdest thing. And I'm like, me, I could care less. Nothing bothers me, right? You can say whatever the hell you want about me or whatever. And people are just fucking stupid, right? Who cares? But I'm like, I'm with my boss, who happens to be Jewish, and this guy's just dropping Jew bombs, and I'm like, oh, this is not freaking cool, man.
Yeah. Like, I'm like the same way. Like I could brush things off. I mean, similar story, but kind of a little bit different. We were 4th of July. Remember, we cut out early, went over to Taylor's family's. Met her family for the first time. All Irish. They're all Irish.
Yeah. Okay. I know where this is going. Yeah.
And they looked, and the one guy, I forget his name, but for probably better, I don't say names on for this part of the story.
In case they listen.
Yeah. I mean, he was nice. He just was saying, what ethnicity are you? Because obviously you have darker features. And he was just like, or not ethnicity, what's your background? He was asking because he has 2 Irish cloves right here. And I'm like, I'm Italian. Oh, he's like, you're one of those Dagos. And I was just like,
yeah,
I just kind of
exactly the same thing.
I was just kind of like laughed it off. But like, I've heard stories of, I guess, our family members or some other people who like have also been called that, and they like don't take it lightly, or so they say. They don't take it lightly. I just kind of laughed it off. I was just like, whatever. I'm not going to cause a stink. This is literally my first time meeting that side of Taylor's family. I'm not going to be like, oh,
Yeah, and it makes you wonder. It's like, are these people testing the waters just to see how you react?
Yeah, or are they testing you as a person? Like,
is that really how they are? And truly, I think this guy was just that's him, right?
Sure.
And sure enough, at the end of it, like he after he trashed everybody, including the Jewish comment, he then turns and says, "Hey, what's your nationality?" And I'm like, "Ukrainian." And he goes to my boss. He goes, "What are you about you?" He goes, "Oh, I'm Jewish."
Oh my God.
And I was, and of course, I think at that point it resonated like, oh shit. And he starts to he basically justifies it by saying, "Well, I trashed everybody. You know, I'm an equal opportunity, racist, right? I trashed everybody." So
I mean, I guess he kind of like backed himself.
That was his justification, and we're just, we're all like, yeah, okay, just kind of, we gotta go.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a meeting in 10 minutes.
Let's wrap this up.
Oh, and I said to him, it's $1 million deal, so it's a pretty important deal for me. But I literally left and I was like, holy shit, I just want out of this deal, and I never want to.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, I feel like people like ourselves, we could kind of laugh that off. But then you always wonder, like, the opposite side of the fence. Like, I see on TikTok, there's this hairdresser, and no hate towards any of these people, but she's a hairdresser. But one of the questions, and she attracts a certain crowd that comes in, you could clearly see, but one of the questions she asks is, do I have consent to touch you? But she's a hairdresser. So, like, she's like, I could only imagine if someone were to say, like, some of those comments in front of, like, someone who's a little bit more, you know what I mean? Like, a little bit more on the liberal side or that side of the fence. It's like, bro, they would probably, like, have, like, a meltdown, like, fucking cancel everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's like one of those things you just got to laugh it off, man.
Yeah, I mean, and then I was like telling my boss, I said, look, you and I obviously just kind of just took it in stride, right? And it was really, I mean, it was a big deal, but shit happens all the time, especially when you get in the, with contractors and
contractors.
I mean, I'm not bad mouthing contractors, but I mean, salt of the earth guys, right? Everybody kind of has, an edge to them, right? And generally speaking, I don't think it's kind of vindictive or anything, but I'm like, in this world we live in, you can't get away with that anymore.
No, I mean,
and like, if you don't, I mean, if he knew us, if he had been around us at any point, even once before, and kind of knew the vibe and say, "Oh, I know Joe's a Trump guy and he has guns," and it's not, it'll just wash off him, right? But he didn't know us at all, and I'm like, dude, you can't do that anymore in this world we live in, because I mean, how do you know I'm not a raging freaking liberal who's just going to go batshit crazy and like
kind of to my argument, right?
I mean, you just don't know.
We were working with a contractor the past 2 days, Thursday, Friday. And some of the stuff this guy says on the job. Oh,
yeah, look, it's
he said it to the guy because we were subs, and the actual general contractor. They had a facility general contractor, and he's the he's like an electrician.
Yeah, contractors on generals under generals.
Yeah, then we're the sub. So we were listening to this guy who then was talking to the other guy. And he's like out loud while the other general contractor's there. He's just like, yeah, I mean, he's like, yo, by the way, David, I have a question for you. First time meeting the guy, just trying to lighten the mood, I guess. If there was 30 dicks on a wall, how many would you choke on? I'm like, I'm not answering this fucking question. He's like, how many? And it took me a second. The other guy I was with, he's thinking, he's like, probably 0. And he's like, you would choke on 0? He's like, you're gay. It was just one of those dirty jokes.
Oh, man.
But anyway,
well, if any episode's going to get banned, it'll be this one. Who knew this is where it was going to go? Oh my god.
Well, who cares? I mean.
No, but I mean, that's the world we live in. It's fucking crazy. So anyway,
I heard those jokes. I'm sorry about that. I heard that, and I was like, dude, this guy's crazy.
That shit happens all the time. Now it's just the world that's what we live in.
Anywho, we were talking about something beforehand, and I felt like that's what it was. That's what it was. The quality of podcasts.
Why does it keep cutting? See, now this is where it's not overheating, right? Because I'm not getting a message saying why is it just shutting off?
You have full charge on it, by the way.
Oh man.
What a point to stop. What a hard cut
so
to
aggravating.
Stop it.
Like it's never done this before, so I don't even know what to say. I'm just totally at a loss.
I'm still stuck on the other conversation.
God, and you know what? This is like Groundhog Day because I'm the dumbass who keeps using the same freaking camera, expecting a different outcome. Right? That's the definition of insanity. Right? Here I am. Why should I be surprised?
About quality of podcasts. You were watching a podcast that had lower quality.
So yeah, I mean, regarding podcasts, there was a couple things I did. I jumped on B&H had that podcast thing last weekend, so I jumped on it. I'll talk about that in a second.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Because I thought it was kind of interesting, and some of the things they were making made sense. I mean, it's all very basic, but let me get to that first, right? And then I'll get to your question about quality, right? So I think the one thing that they were saying, like they're talking about, hey, you want to do a podcast?
Can you set it up a little bit better?
Here's all your gear and stuff like that.
Set up. So he was talking about a event that they hosted for podcasters.
So B&H, right? B&H, the camera people, had a panel. I think it was a 90-minute panel that basically a bunch of podcasters, and they were basically it was supposed to be an informational thing where they talk about equipment you can use, how do you get started, tricks of the trade, all that kind of good stuff.
Thank you for saying.
Right?
Sorry for interrupting you.
I don't know who any of the podcasters were, but they've all obviously been doing it for some time, and obviously know what they're doing, right?
Sure.
And one guy actually couldn't make it in because it was right around that same time that the CrowdStrike thing hit, and he was flying Delta and couldn't make it, so he was remote. But they were talking about a bunch of gear, right? And we'll get to the gear in a second because I think that's important. But they were mentioning, like, if you're doing a podcast, you need a theme, like, and I'm thinking to myself, man, we have absolutely no theme and never have, right? We talked about day one that it was going to be a conversation about our generational differences. And it comes up every once in a while, but generally speaking, we get on this and we just whatever, right?
Yeah.
We're all over the place.
Start yapping.
And that's not the way you're ever going to be successful, because people come and they have no idea why they're coming other than, hey, it's Dave and Joe. I know them from around the corner, right? But someone from the outside, what the hell? I mean,
what's the draw?
Yeah, there's nothing here. There's no consistency. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, we're not really doing it, I think, for fame and glory. We kind of do it because it's fun and it's a learning experience. But at some point, it does make sense that we really do. We need to actually, this podcast has to have some sort of theme or meaning or sort of foundation, right? And then what he said is, like, you can stray from it, but you really need to have the foundation is you're talking about politics, you're talking about sports, you're talking about fashion, whatever it is, right? So people know, hey, I'm coming and I'm going to hear what's the latest and greatest on technology or Bitcoin. And we kind of had
a segment on that.
Yeah, we had a crypto segment, we had a sports boxing segment, and we had some consistency, but it was, generally speaking, we're all over the freaking place. And I'm like, basically what he was saying was the way we do this podcast is not the way you're supposed to do a podcast.
Here's the line, we're like way over here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or we're going this way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and they were like, most podcasts last 7 episodes is sort of the breaker, make or break, and I'm like, oh, we got that covered by a mile. But clearly consistency is the challenge. Consistency on when you release the podcast is also a big one, right? And we've been horrible with that. We used to be great with it, but now we're horrible with it. And there's just a lot of things, right? And we're not the full send, right? Where we can go away for a month and then come back with president or somebody who's got going to draw in, and people are like, okay, I don't care that they haven't been on for a while, right? We don't have any of that. So that was that, which I thought was interesting. And we at some point we have to have a come to Jesus. What's important, right?
Yeah, I would love to kind of structure it, and that brings up. I mean, now it's funny. The first however many minutes was 20 minutes of just kind of yapping about completely other stuff. But circling it back to this, if there was any part that was taking out of context, I would hope it would be this part. I think we need to have that theme, whatever it is. Just we got to think on it. I mean, I always think we have a lot of things that we both enjoy and we always talk about, whether it be the crypto stuff, life topics, or what have you. But
motorcycles all of a sudden.
I don't know.
It's ever changing for us.
We need to have that thing that's kind of the base. And for a while, too, we always did kind of have the segments. I mean, even the clothes were kind of a segment at one point as well. So
and if it wasn't our clothes, it was Yeezy or something, right?
Right, exactly.
But it was fashion related. And
so, we got to get back to that. I don't know what exactly it would be under. I mean, I feel like clothes kind of have died off in the the hype aspect of things, because there was a time where the golden era of streetwear was the thing, and we kind of talked about this a number of times in the past, but it was Supreme was this ever big elephant or gorilla or whatever the expression is. You'd have Bape as the competitor to that, and then a bunch of other things like Off-White and everything like that, Ye's brand, Easy. And then the past 2 years, 3 years teetering, it was just kind of
a dead zone.
It's just kind of I wouldn't say cringe, but it's more not the not the topic that it once was, not the strongest thing
Yep.
that was kind of in it. So I think that's something to keep in mind. I think technology, we both are very
Yeah.
technical. But anyway, that's a conversation for off the air. I don't think we sit here and try to think, all right, well, for the first 10 minutes, the second 10 minutes, the third 10 minutes, I think we got to just have that conversation.
I'm trying to remember. There was like some things like when we signed up, for instance, Apple Podcasts, right? There's
Categories.
Yeah, well, there's categories, but we signed up as Exclusive Minds is kind of like the overarching channel, and then you can have like we could have like the Exclusive Minds Technology Podcast, you could have sub podcasts under a brand.
Oh, cool.
So there's ways that you can segment out your conversation points, and even then, if it's like, well, we have sort of just a general shit, whatever, just shoot the shit kind of thing. But then we could have like a technology podcast that's separate, and you know exactly what you're getting. So there's some strategies that they talked about that kind of made sense. And I was thinking about it in my head, and I'm like, yeah, I guess it all makes sense. I mean, that's again, it goes back to the point. Are we really trying to be serious about this, or are we just enjoying, the act of doing it and kind of figuring it out and sort of fine tuning one way or the other, and not really caring that we don't have 1 million viewers, right? So that was the one thing. And then the other thing obviously was equipment, right? And they were going through a laundry list of stuff, and it's typical, but it really got me thinking. And I don't know if it was just coincidence, but I was listening to 2 podcasts, and I mean, these are top, I'm guessing easily top 100 podcasts, globally, right? And the sound quality was absolute fucking garbage. And I literally was in the car with Noah on the one, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with this picture? These guys are they're making serious bank, and they got millions of viewers, and the quality is absolute garbage. And I'm like, we've done this, 71 times. We're using a goddamn Zoom $180 podcaster with a couple of crappy mics. And the quality on our podcast generally has been really, really good. And I'm like... Minus
GoPro taking craps on
us. Yeah, well, okay. I mean...
bullshit.
Yeah, but I mean, the audio is
superb. Yeah.
Spot on. And I'm thinking to myself... I'm using freaking iMovie, right?
Yeah.
And GarageBand, and when I'm exporting it, it automatically levels the audio, right? So it takes out all the spikes and stuff like that automatically without me even asking it to do it. And I'm like, that's the simplest. I mean, it's so basic and simple. And I'm like, what the hell are these guys doing?
Yeah, and it could take you out of the experience of listening too. Like, you know what I mean?
The Patrick, the other one was it was Patrick David. What the hell's the guy's name? Patrick Bet David or something like that.
PDB.
So I don't. This guy's a businessman and very successful, and so I guess he's been doing this podcast for not too long. But I've listened to a couple of other episodes. I don't listen to it on a consistent basis, but this one he just happened to be clearly he was remote, and he has 2 other guys that I guess were not in the same room as him. So it was just constant, like people just their audio dropping or cutting in and out or losing connections, and I'm like, it's awful. It's fucking awful.
One of the points that you brought up, and I guess I'm gonna spin it back to you. The question is like, they did it and they put it out. Would it be almost better to not put it out? And what do you think it would? What do you think the lesser of the 2 evils should be? It was
so bad that one should probably not have been put out. They should have just wiped it away and re-recorded it or something like that. And look, we've been here before where we've literally talked for an hour to find out that I forgot to push the record button on, the audio, and we were like, holy shit, we just lost an hour, right? And you just shake it off and redo it. But
or do
it was so bad. And I'm like, I know these guys all have full-time production people. They have to. I mean, these are serious podcasts, right? They have serious audiences, and I'm like, and serious money behind them, and I'm like, it was awful. And the other one was Logan Paul's, right? Generally, that one's not too bad. But this one was, the situation was they had a bunch of people on mics, and certain mics were really soft and certain mics were super loud. So I'm in the car, and when one person's talking, I have to turn it up to even hear what they're saying. But then as soon as it switches over to another person, it's blasting my eardrums out, and you turn it down. And it was this constant battle of, do you turn it up, the audio up, or do you turn it down? And I'm like, that's like so fucking like when you export it as an MP4 file, it auto corrects that.
I know.
Like, what the fuck are they doing? And you know, it's Logan Paul. You know, the fucker's got like he's got
Millions
a
of
whole
dollars.
crew behind him.
I
Right?
know.
He's got people who can film him 24/7. He's got an audio technician who, I'm like, was a dude on vacation or something? I mean, what the hell?
It's funny. I mean,
And it's not the first time.
it's funny because I was big into podcasts, listening from a consumer point a few months ago, a few years ago, and I find myself nowadays, the main podcast I listen to is Joe Rogan. I feel like you said, there's that aspect of just consistency across the board, and it's just like the guy Jamie, who's the audio guy / I'm assuming the video guy. I don't really know. It just sounds like they set up tripods and kind of that's it. They might have a camera crew, but from what it sounds like, it's just the guy Jamie, Joe, and a guest. Typically, that's the shoot.
I'm sure there's a lot more. I mean,
there's probably more on the technical side.
$100 million a year. There's a hell of a lot more behind the scenes going on there.
But it's for what it is 3 hours. He's going to be talking to somebody. Could be anybody. Typically, it's in the description.
I'll tell you what, though,
and that's kind of it.
The Rogan thing is a blessing and a curse, if you ask me, because obviously every day he's doing 3+ hour, 2.5 hours.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
But what I find is if he's like interviewing a comedian I've never heard of, I'm not going to invest 3 hours into listening to it. Could be great content. I kind of mark it as played and move. So I tend to listen to Rogan when it's someone I want to hear, or I just can't. Like, I don't want to get started with like a 3-hour podcast for
comedians.
Someone who I don't really recognize, or like I don't need to hear him talk about another comedian and what the latest and greatest is with his comedy club. And, I mean, it's kind of rinse and repeat when he's talking to the comedians. So it's kind of a curse and a blessing, right? I tend to go to him when he's doing an interview with someone who I like.
Sure.
And the reason for that is because it's every fucking day, right?
Yeah.
If it was twice a week or once a week, I might get invested in listening to some of those things. But that's kind of the curse and the blessing, right? It's great that he's going to be doing it 4 times a week. It's also bad that, when he has a 2.5 hour, one with someone, I just kind of skip it because I know tomorrow he's going to be back with someone else for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, it's funny you say that too, because I like the ones with the comedians and mostly the comedians I know, because I like the space of it. But then there's some comedians that I don't know, and they're just like shooting the shit that's just like between them. You know what I mean? Like the Shane Gillis one I'll watch all the time. Joey Diaz is an absolute one I'm watching every single time. And
I've listened to some of them. I mean, I've listened to Diaz. I mean, it was just that every once in a while I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is. And like I said, the content can be great because he's always good. But sometimes I'm like, I can't invest this time every day. So let me thin it out and pick and choose, right? He has some like he had Terrence Howard on, and I was just like listening to it, and I'm like, holy shit!
Well, did you listen to the second one with him on there? That one was the one
where he had the mathematician guy. I can't remember his name on, and the mathematician guy's
tore him apart. Yeah,
didn't tear him apart, but he was just like, you're not listening, right? You're basically coming into it's like you're coming into my house and then telling me, hey, you can't cook for shit. That's not how you do it.
It was some of the people in the comments were on the side of his name, Terrence right?
Howard, yeah.
They were like on the side of him for being like, at least he's like trying to do it, and he's having like an intellectual conversation to a certain point. Like clearly, there's a difference between the mathematician guy and I don't know his name either, and him. But like to the average person who probably doesn't know as much, like he probably does have that slight advantage, just not to the guy who's obviously been doing it his entire life.
Yes.
And Neil deGrasse Tyson also made a response to Terrence. Now that was a teardown. Like he broke down all the points. It was red ink. He went through and absolutely hammered him. And it was crazy.
Well, so, you listen to that. I mean, we could get into that one all day long, but that was kind of interesting too, because the mathematician guy's like, Yeah, that was a dog shit answer because these guys are all academics and they basically are self-protecting. So anybody who comes with any sort of an idea, they're going to immediately just shit all over it because they're all trying to basically get funding from the government or some outside entity and they're protecting it. So
Wait, what's this? I'm sorry.
So he's basically saying that if you think about all these scientists,
Okay.
right? How do they get paid? Like, how does Neil Tyson deGrasse get paid, right? You know, he's kind of the exception because he's got some television exposure. But generally speaking, all these guys are academics. They're teachers or professors at some university.
Yeah.
And it's not really their salary as a teacher that gets them paid. It's their government grants for whatever initiative or project or something like that. So he's basically saying, like, there's only a finite amount of money that gets put into this, into this space. And so these guys are all like rabid dogs on a bone. And anybody who tries to come in with some sort of a new idea, whether it's got merit or not, they typically are just what Tyson did.
Yeah.
Is just shit all over it instead of trying to be constructive and productive about it, right? Which was supposed to be the intent of this guy coming on with Rogan, and it was just kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah, no, and props to, like I said, Terrence seems like a intelligent person. I don't know the guy from Adam, but he seems like a somewhat of an intelligent person. Just I really don't.
But I mean, if you didn't follow the first one and like, well, what's the second one? It was 3.5 hours. And I could it's like I said, it's the kiss and the death, right? Because it's like,
it's like who's watching the whole thing?
If it doesn't resonate with you, you're going to be like shutting it off. Yeah. And I'm sure that happens all the time. And I'm sure he's got all kinds of metrics and stuff like that and reports, but it's working, so,
Absolutely.
But that was, those were the two things, right? It was have a common theme and have, consistency both on that theme as well as when you put it out, publish it, right? Which we've kind of known and gotten away from. And then the quality, the equipment, right? And the equipment shows itself in different ways. And like I said, some of these really top-notch podcasts, and I'm like, their audio is awful. Like, I scratch my head and I go, I get a lot of them are probably remotes, but I have a Yeti Go Pack thing, right? I throw all this shit into it and I carry it over to your house at the Super Bowl, right? And unpack it in 30 seconds and the quality's still great. I'm like, so I don't want to hear that it's, because we're doing remotes and stuff like that.
We should honestly do a remote one. I was thinking about it last weekend because I had
you guys can all see, right? It's a Zoom it's a Zoom thing with a couple of mics in it, but just it's self-contained. And
I'm saying we should do a remote one just to prove that it's not as hard because we've did it with Marcus before, right? Like Marcus called in or Carol Baskin even. We did
Carol Baskin,
you know. But last weekend I texted Joe. I was driving around all weekend long, and I was like, hey man, if you want to do the podcast, we could go on Zoom or Discord, or I said we could do a call, but you were busy anyway. I was like, I just did not feel like doing it or driving anymore. I was like, oh man, this, don't mean to do a cop out, but
it's a long 3-minute drive to my house.
It's the 3 hours before your house.
Trust me, I get it.
But yeah, so
that's the problem that I think we've had is there hasn't been that consistency, but it's just. Yeah, it was kind of funny, and it was interesting. It's nothing I didn't know, and
there's probably good takeaways overall, I would say. I think that the conversation, I'm thinking more and more about it. Like, we even talked about, like, video games was, like, part of our segments for a little bit, like, there's always something.
Yeah.
It just was, like, our segments would differ from pod to pod.
And there's ways, there's strategies, I guess what they were saying is like, you don't have to lock yourself into one thing, right? It could be a lifestyle podcast, which allows you the freedom to really just go all over the place. But at the end of the day, though, you still have to stick to that lifestyle theme. And it can't be all of a sudden talking politics or, talking my dog took a shit on the neighbor's yard and he came over and screamed at me, right? Nobody cares, right? It was a cool story for us to tell, like, that dickhead across. My neighbors are not dicks, but just
in case anyone's listening.
That was the other thing. It's like you have to make sure, because what happens is a lot of people get in and they'll start talking inside jokes, right? We kind of did it with the Renaissance Fair, right? And there's like 4 people who know what the hell we're talking about, right? And nobody else does, right? See, you're laughing, but everybody else is like, what the fuck are they talking about? So that was the one thing he said is, if you're doing a podcast, you got to make sure that you're not talking about shit the audience has no idea what the hell you're talking talking
explain this whole thing in the first place.
Right.
You know what I mean? Is to
And
give
a lot
that,
of times we don't do those kinds of things. And so there
It's like
were
setting it up.
strategies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think to build an audience and like being an influencer to begin with and crossing over the bridge into the podcast land, if you would want to call it that, is a lot easier because you already have the like 1 million followers from YouTube. You jump over, let's say 100,000 follow you over here. It's a lot easier to build with that base of 100,000 versus starting with no platform across the board into a heavily saturated market and trying to, I guess, if you're trying to build it as such, as like a solo entity, you know what I mean?
I mean, it's kind of interesting because, I mean, if you look beyond the political podcasts, all of the big ones, I think, are interviewing
podcasts.
Right. And that's self-sustaining once you get to a certain level. Like, I thought about this because I'm like, it's the same guests making rotations on...
Like they're doing a PR run.
Right.
They're doing a PR run, yeah.
Like, I'm okay. Like, J.D. Vance was on the Full Send, but I mean, he's going to be on everybody's podcast over time, right? He's going to do all the political ones. And I'm like, yeah, you know, Musk does the same thing. Like, every once in a while, he'll make the rounds, right? And I'm like, these guys are all... Because I'm starting to hear repeats, and I'm like, holy shit, it's just like this incestual, like, you know, circle jerk where once you kind of get into that clique or that orbit, it's so easy to get people. I mean, it's just fucking easy. And I'm like...
Yeah, I mean, and you were speaking about politics and J.D. Vance. I've been seeing a lot, and I really don't mean to go back on the politics tip, but Kamala Harris's marketing team, I don't know how much money they're spending on marketing. Oh my God, she's all over the place. Have you seen any of her stuff? Like, well, you're not on socials as much, but
millions of dollars, billions. I mean, it'll probably end up being $1 billion spent.
I'm not on Facebook, but between like on my TikTok feed, like it's always coming up.
You know what's so
and it's not even like I'm like actively looking for politics.
That's what I'm thinking. Like,
I'm not looking for politics.
I know in my most of us just are already predetermined, right? So I guess they're going after the uncommitted at this point. But how many uncommitteds are there in this world? Like, how many people go even today? Like, I'm not sure if I'm going to vote for Trump or if I'm going to vote for Kamala. Like, everybody knows, man. And I can't ever think of a freaking ad on social media influencing me to do jack shit anything, right? I mean,
yeah, no.
I guess every once in a while there's like some sort of clothing thing or something I'll go look at and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. But
it's
even then I don't.
Though. Yeah.
I'm like, I don't think I've ever stopped and said, wow, that's really cool. And then buy it, right? It just, oh man, I don't know. It just seems like it's a waste of money.
I see the billboards and it's like a picture of, in this case, I guess it would be like Trump, and it'd just say like something like a nasty thing about him, like only cares for himself, and then a picture of the guy, right? And at the bottom it'll say not used or paid for. It'll say either paid for
by supporters of Trump or something, or
versus whatever.
Or Kamala.
Like,
and
what are you accomplishing by seeing that though? Like on both sides, right? Like you see, if you're a Republican, you see that you're like, oh fuck these people. But then if you're a Democrat and you're supporting, it's like, oh woo, like
and nothing.
But like
nothing
what comes from it? What's the like thinking of it from like a marketing perspective? There's typically like a flow, like a funnel they call it. Like what's the funnel of that? Like what does that look like, right? Like what's the end point of that?
I don't think advertising does much of anything to change people's minds. It could. I mean, I guess there's a point to doing it. I don't know politics, but I scratch my head and I think it just seems like a waste of money because it's like, you know, the majority, I mean, God, it's got to be a super majority of people have already made a decision.
Right. Maybe it's just like compounding the consensus.
I could see the debates changing people's minds because then you're hearing directly from the candidates, right? Or in the case of Biden, right, where you basically just shit the show right on TV. I don't know, man. It just whatever.
Yeah.
But
a lot of people were saying too that it was kind of
politics is like a black hole, man. We're getting sucked into it again. It's like so easy to talk about.
A lot of people were saying that it was kind of unfair, though. That I guess Kamala ran, or they announced her as the person because they didn't have like a typical like a voting system. Like it was just like she got into it. You know what I mean?
The way it works, right? You know, is they have primaries where you basically have whatever it is, 8, 10, 4 candidates that you elect to eventually run for it. So all the Democrats have, their primary, and they all voted for Biden, and then he drops out, and so no one ever casted a vote for her to run for president, yet here she is running for president. So they're basically like, she completely skirted the entire democratic process.
Sure. Yeah,
they could put anybody in, right? It just happened to be her, but they could have. It could have been Michelle Obama without having to do any of the legwork. Any of this. It's just so they're like, this really is kind of sleazy and shady because no one voted for her to be there.
When you kind of get into it too, like you think like it was always going to be her because the finances wouldn't have made sense for them to go with anybody else.
That's one of the things, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it wouldn't have, because at this point where it's August 3rd, November is typically like election time. Like they would have to raise, I don't know what the budget is, but millions upon millions of dollars had they have went with somebody else. So it's kind of always like that. But to your point, you kind of hit the nail on the head where she kind of just got that like. Skip 2 spaces versus the people that have to kind of get that initial vote per se. So politics is kind of like you just like even if you just kind of always circle back.
I mean, we're not even like we're total outsiders, right? We really don't know all the lingo and the ins and outs, and we could easily spend an hour talking about it and. It just wouldn't take much. It's like it's just like a black hole that just never ends, right? And
I guess
that's why it's easy for those guys to do daily content.
Sure,
but so I mean that was kind of the podcast 101 that I got from that B&H thing, and then just sort of having a different perspective on listening to podcasts and going, what the hell? I'll tell you who has really freaking amazing audio is Tucker Carlson's podcast. That guy, he must have some really high-end audio because it is crystal clear, and I'm like, that's how it's supposed to be done.
Is he still posting it on X? That's his main platform?
He's still posting it on X.
That's his main
Yeah,
thing.
I don't know if... I'm guessing he probably does Rumble too, but I think it's X.
Yeah, Rumble kind of fell off from the board a little bit. I don't know. Do you still use Rumble?
All the time.
What about Threads? When was the last time?
Fuck that. I deleted it. I deleted the app. I'm like, fuck that.
I remember we had a conversation 2 months ago, or no, it had to have been longer. Sheesh, it had to have been 6 months ago when it first came out. You know what I mean? It was like we were like always like, oh, well, it could possibly like we kind of both were on the same page. Like we didn't think it was necessarily going to run.
Another one of these for?
Yeah, and it's so funny. Like I'll get a notification that someone like has, so and so has followed you, because naturally when you switch over from Instagram to there, Threads. You get a follow.
Yep.
They missed the mark with that.
And that's one of the reasons why I deleted it, because I kept getting, the icon lighting up that something's going on, and then I look and I'm like, and then I click on it and it's Threads, and I'm like, oh fuck Threads, and I screw that. So I ended up deleting it. So I don't even have it on my app.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to news, like where you're consuming stuff, and honestly, like Twitter or X, whatever, like. That's still the main platform across the boards. Yes, it lost a lot of money, but that's the main platform. Instagram kind of is dying, and it's not as strong as it once was. Yeah, it's really like I'm
sharing
seeing
your pictures with your friends and family in a different format.
You're not seeing brands build on. You're not seeing brands build on Instagram like you're seeing brands built on even like YouTube Shorts. I feel like that has more of a pull than Instagram does. Like you could post an Instagram Reel rather and a YouTube Short, and I think like some metrics were shown recently that the YouTube Short is pulling forward more than the Reel. I don't know. I think the next app, and really the one kind of at the forefront of everything, is TikTok, Twitter, and those are like the two main giants. Like I don't really. The only one that could surpass TikTok is if another app was able to do what TikTok does, but on a much globaler scale. And what I mean by that is you could post a TikTok and become an overnight sensation.
I'm guessing. So if you run a VPN, can you even get on TikTok?
It depends on what country you're in. If you're in China, you have like a different formula than if you do in the United States.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, VPNs are becoming so problematic because, I mean, I've tried to always kind of use VPNs, and lately, man, I'm telling you, I like 75% of websites just choke if you're running a VPN.
Yeah. What is your main browser? What do you
Safari.
use? Safari, gotcha.
I'm an Apple guy all the way through.
All the way through and through.
You know, if there's an evil company, I'm guessing they're the lesser of the evil companies. I just, you know, when it comes to the privacy stuff, they at least have some stuff baked in to try and protect you. At least in my head, I think they do. But
Yeah.
I typically run a VPN over top of that. So
Yeah, there's been a not new, probably old to most people, but newer to me because I just started seeing it. And it's some search engine. I forget the name of it, but they include AI in a lot of their stuff. And I wanted to try it because Google Chrome's always been my main thing, but I always heard Google.
Well, I mean, I
has,
guess
like,
as soon as you involve AI, you're immediately giving it license to just basically
everything is like that.
capture not only everything you do going forward, but like it starts to probably do a crawl of your hard drive and shit. So
It's my phone. I don't care.
I mean, I know everybody's kind of like, what do I care? But yeah.
I mean, everything does it anyway, man. I mean,
know,
think
it's-
of
well, that's
think,
the- that's
think of
why-
Facebook. Every time you talk about something, there's an ad for
no, it's
Clorox
terrible.
or something like that. So it's like, if you really want to truly go off the grid, don't start with just your browser. Start with the whole phone itself. But yeah, I don't know. There's a couple
Noah. So I mean, the VPN I'm using now is really interesting because Noah found it. It's what the hell is it called? Mulholland. It's Mul something, but you don't even have to. You can basically go to Amazon and order like a gift card, and then scratch the number, and then that's how you pay for it. You never give them any of your contact information.
Wow.
So you're running a VPN, and they know nothing about you other than you had some code that came from a random generated thing, and so it's really like that one's kind of super cool. But I find that like literally 75% of websites just croak because they all have if they don't have the hooks, it just shuts you down. Like
Yeah. I don't know how that works. I mean, I would imagine there's just like a database somewhere, and a bunch of people are just tapping into these databases that are all over the place. Like,
Well,
how would that
I think-
work? You know what I mean? Like,
I think in some cases what happens is they compile a list of known VPN access points, and they flag them, and then as soon as because I'll actually get some websites that go, you're using a VPN. We can't give you any information. So you get that every once in a while, but generally speaking, I think that they flag the IPs of the VPNs, knowing that that's where a lot of traffic comes from. And as soon as they see that, they basically say, "Yeah, no, you can't do that."
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
So other than that, I did get on the motorcycle.
oh shoot, yeah, check you out.
Yeah,
We talked about it last weekend, but I forgot it wasn't on the podcast. It was for Hayden's birthday.
yeah. So
We were talking about that briefly.
I think we did talk on the podcast how I was going completely batshit mental about being afraid to get on it, and
How was it?
as soon as I got on it, 10 minutes later, I was like, "Oh yeah, this isn't so bad."
Yeah. How many times have you took it out? Would you say since 2 weeks ago?
I don't know, 3 or 4.
Nice.
Nothing really crazy, just around the neighborhood and stuff like that. But yeah, it came. But I was just getting so worked up about like the clutch control and everything. And sure enough, it was just I really worked myself up over nothing.
Yeah.
It was really kind of a weird month because I mean I was kind of going. I was sort of having a psychotic breakdown on the motorcycle, and then that spilled over to work. And so every quarter, we have to do a 45-minute presentation to our senior management.
Did you really?
Yeah, and it sounds really scary and stuff like that. But I've been doing it for 10 years, and it has never bothered me.
Yeah.
And this time, I literally was on the call, and I could feel my pulse rate like going through the
my
roof.
God.
I'm getting the cold sweats, and I've never had it. I'm like, I'm having a fucking anxiety attack.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, this is the motorcycle fucker. And like
Yeah.
I could kind of pin it to that because I'm like, I have never had an anxiety attack about shit. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm ice cold.
While
right?
you're talking?
And I calmed down pretty quick, but going in, I was fucking freaking out. I'm like, this has never happened before.
So let me guess. So you're doing this. I'm kind of curious. So it's you and your boss, or you're a couple bosses, or how does it go?
It is.
What's the layout?
It is my immediate boss, his boss, and then his boss's boss. So it's 3 levels of senior management.
Okay. Well, then his boss's boss, isn't that the CEO of the company?
No. So it's the regional vice president, the national sales manager, or VP of U.S. sales, and then it's the global sales. So it's
the
3
global
levels.
Sales is probably
Next
very
level is basically the CEO.
After the global sales.
Yeah, and then there's like the finance guy. There's the operations business unit manager. There's a bunch of. I mean, there's literally probably 20 people on a call every quarter, and basically we go through like I don't know, maybe a dozen to 14 slides, something like that, dozen slides, and it's just it's all the metrics. Like everything's metric driven.
Are you preparing the slides?
So a lot of the data is given to us out of Salesforce, which is the CRM for, contact management and orders and all the other stuff. And then some of it's, who are the top 5 accounts and, what was the interaction with those accounts and blah, 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 right? So it's a lot of blocking and tackling, and some of it is canned. This is how you did. Like, you were 80% Y, you were 110% Y. You forecasted this and you missed it or you hit it or you were under Y, right? And, again, most people we would probably get super intimidated. Most of the people on our team, it's been something that's been built into the DNA, so everybody's kind of comfortable with it. But for some reason, man, you're getting that. It was the weirdest thing. I've heard stories, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm having an anxiety attack because I know that's how, it's the way it's always been described, right? You get flush and you're sweating and your heart rate's going. I'm like, I'm having a goddamn anxiety.
Well, maybe
attack.
it also kind of tied into the fact. Maybe it tied into the fact too. Like, if I'm not mistaken, this is your second quarter in the new role, right?
It's a little bit of that. What it was is I was 110% in the quarter that I was presenting on, but you also are forecasting your next quarter. My next quarter is absolute garbage.
Oh, is that right?
So that certainly had some of it because it's like the first time that I've ever had to really say, hey, this upcoming quarter is going to suck. Yeah. And I don't have the answer on how to fix it, right? So that didn't help.
Like suck or just suck?
No, it's going to be bad. Like really bad. Uh-oh. And I haven't had that. Usually, I'm usually like, I don't know, anywhere between like 90 or, 90 to 110. It's like in that range typically, right? But this upcoming quarter, I'm going to be in the 60s. It's going to be really bad.
And when he says percent, you're talking about your target sales.
Yeah. So if I have a $17 million number, break it up, divide it by 4. So it's like 4.25 million. And then I'm going to do 60% of that, which is like, 2.5 million out of 4, right?
Well, hopefully
really
some
bad,
of that,
right?
hopefully you said 110. So hopefully that top 10% can kind of transfer into the next one.
They look at everything, right? They look at it quarterly, they look at it yearly, they look at it year over year, right? So even if you tank, but you actually improved on last year's numbers. There's a bunch of ways to dice it up, right? So, and we're not a company that if you suck one quarter, they
can you.
That's it. The battery died this time, I think, but they don't can you if you miss one, right? So. It is what it is. But it was something that I had never experienced before. And I'm like, or I can't remember the last time I experienced it. I'm sure I did in my early days, but I was like, holy shit. I didn't know what to do. And I was freaking out. And I'm like, it's the fucking motorcycle carrying over to my real life. I'm like, God damn it. And, sure enough, it was the exact same experience. Once I got into the presentation, I was like, fine. Like, it just started to flow and everything was fine. And I kind of got normal, but I was like, I worked myself up.
Yep.
And the motorcycle, I don't even know how to explain how much I work myself up.
They say that anxiety is the worry of the future and depression is the worry of the past. You kind of fall on one side of the teetering.
Yeah, and it's not like I had a bad experience on a motorcycle previously, right? I've dropped a bike before, stupid shit, but yeah, I don't know, man. I just I got so worked up. Like I was afraid. I was truly afraid to get on it. And then once I got on it, I was like, holy shit, this is just not that bad. I still have a long way to go to really kind of be like, I want to get on the highway at 80 miles an hour and stuff like that and start doing canyon curves and stuff like that. But driving it around here, it was all about nothing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited. I'm actually enjoying being on it now. It's like, yeah, great. I got to get back out there. I was going to go out today until I realized it was like 1,000 fucking degrees and
Well, I was going to say
80%
you gotta
humidity.
put on all that stuff. So.
Well, so I mean, it's all summer gear, even though it doesn't look like it. It's got perforations and stuff like that. So once you get moving, it flows air pretty good. But I'm not really doing high speed stuff. And then I was kind of just doing a bunch of drills in some of the parking lots, which is lower speed. And man, it gets smoking hot in a hurry, even with ventilated gear.
You'll see like the hillbilly on a Harley Davidson, like shirt, jean shorts, and he's like cruising along. It's like, bro, if you fail, you're
in my younger
dead.
day, I would do that, but at my age,
not worth it.
I am not. I mean, I know for a fact that if I ever get into an accident, I am not bouncing back overnight. Right? I mean, it's a long haul for me to recover from scrapes, and if I'm out in the yard and I scrape myself, it takes like a month for a scar to heal, where it used to take 30 days or 3 days. Right? So. I know that you won't ever see me on a bike without all the heavy duty gear. And you won't.
Yeah, better to be proactive than reactive, right?
Yeah. So I'm pretty good about that. But yeah, we're right on the hour. Actually, the other camera's going to cut out on the hour mark. So
well, it was a good one. Sorry, it started off kind of crude. I mean, it was more bullshit.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the nature of the world we live in, man. It's just like everybody's got opinions, and some people like to talk about them, others people don't want to hear about them, and it's just a weird place we live.
Yeah, maybe next time we'll come prepared with a structure.
Yeah,
I always say that, but it's all good.
Awesome. All right. Peace out, everybody. We'll be back with our probably typical ram.